Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this great big world of ours, absolutely crazy every time they hear it, Ginger. I'm the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, and I'm glad as always to have back as my co-pilot, and occasional co-host of this program, Ginger Morgan. She's the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you?
I am doing well, especially since it's a tad bit cooler in Memphis today.
It has cooled off a bit, and that's good news because we are less than 4 weeks away from Walk 3, and we're kind of making last-minute preparations, but we're still doing some training, and it's been just absolutely brutal down here in Memphis. But I got to tell you, I'm so happy to have our guest for this episode, Ginger, because one thing I just had so much fun on her website, learning about her podcast, because there's one word that I saw over and over again, and everything that I read and everything that I saw about her said the same thing, and that is loud. Loud. If you look right behind her, Wag Out Loud is the name of her podcast. But Ginger, one thing that I talk about time and time again on this podcast is that every pet parent in this entire big old fruited planet of ours needs to get loud about cancer and our companion animals. 6 million new cases of cancer in dogs every year. We have to get loud. So hopefully our guest is going to help us get loud about that. She's going to help us get loud about diet and nutrition, all important topics. So Ginger, I'm just so glad to have with us this week. Her name is Krista Karpowich, my apologies. She's the founder of Wag Out Loud. Krista, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends.
Luke, thank you so much for having me. And Ginger, we've already met, and it was a great conversation. We geeked out about dogs.
We did.
I just love, our missions are so similar, Luke, that it's just bringing awareness and education, because I don't want to shame anybody. Years ago, before I got into this industry, I was not the best advocate for my dog's health because I didn't know any better. But now I'm learning every single day, and it's fascinating, the science, the studies, the research. So I am so happy to be with you, and I'm just grateful for all that you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're happy as well. And you're absolutely right. There's so many wonderful things, new technologies, new areas of research and science going on. And our paths totally intersect, Krista, because you're on the cutting edge of wellness and diet nutrition. And we can't talk about cancer and cancer prevention at the Puppy Up Foundation without talking about diet nutrition. Isn't that correct, Ginger?
You're absolutely correct. People ask me that all the time. It's like, is it in their diet? I'm like, most likely, yeah.
So it sounds like we are going to have us the Church of Fuzzybutts here today. And we're going to be preaching to the choir out there, because we do have to get loud. The numbers and statistics are shocking. And this is entirely man-made. And I believe over time that us collectively can be a solution to that. So we have a lot to cover. Krista, I know you have a ton to contribute. So first and foremost, usually since our show is kind of fun and about Fuzzybutts, but I never seem to have my Fuzzybutts anywhere. Ginger, I don't know if you have any, but
I do. I'll be back with one.
All right. While you're doing that, Krista, tell us about your Fuzzybutts.
Well, I have one Fuzzybutt. He is a 13-year-old Norwich Terrier named Winston. And I can't even imagine life without this little guy. He's a big dog in a little body, and he's been through a lot with me. And yes, he's getting a little bit older, but I really think that with the knowledge that I have on canine health, that he is thriving. And I don't know, I think he's going to live till about 50.
We can only hope, right?
Hopefully, yes.
Let's hope for it. Well, what was the inspiration for Wag Out Loud? How did you get involved in this with such a passion and fervor for it?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, it really went back a long time ago, probably about 25 years or so ago. I had another Norwich Terrier named Higgins, and he was getting seizures I went to 3 different veterinarians trying to figure it out, and they could not tell me why. Of course, they wanted to put him on medication. And at the same time, my husband and I were looking at adopting a adult Norfolk Terrier who was in a breeding program and being retired. And the breeder said, we will not sell her to you unless you promise to feed her raw. I'd never fed raw. I'd always fed a dry processed diet. That's what you do, right? So I said I would love to look into it and fed her raw. So I might as well feed Higgins raw. Well, what happened was Higgins never got another seizure in his whole life. So that got me thinking, hey, there is something to nutrition, and fed him forever raw. Then I have Winston, my 13-year-old currently. He has only known a raw diet. And back in 2018, just walking the dog, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I need to get certified in canine nutrition. So took a year because I had a JOB at the time to go through this course, which was very in-depth, and got the certification. And Luke, I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, I'll just start a podcast. So that's what happened. And a little over 3 years later, here we are. I'm also, I'm up to about 160 episodes, and the experts, the guests, the topics have just been phenomenal. And there's so much more to learn.
Congratulations. I have not had a chance or an opportunity to listen to some of your podcasts, but I'm about to be on the road for 10 weeks. So I'll be sleeping in a tent. I'll be sleeping in a tent with my fuzzy butt for 6 nights out of that. So to help me to go to sleep, sometimes I do listen to podcasts to help me sleep. So I will certainly listen to some of yours. And we need a good, strong voice like yours, because there is so much to talk about and so much advocacy to do. So what does, and respect on the 160 episodes. Is that what we said?
I'm coming up on 160. Yes. I think last week was 157.
Congratulations. We just dropped number 28, and it's a full-time job. And I have many projects and walking, 300 miles with a 3-legged dog and doing.
Oh, that's no big deal.
Right. Well, I've done 4,000 miles before. So 1/6 the circumference of the globe I've already walked, for this cause with dogs. So I've got that in the bag and in my wheelhouse. But this, I'm older, plus it's a 3-legged dog. And it just represents, it's a different environment, represents unique challenges. But I'm doing it because I lost my dog to metastatic mast cell cancer last September. And he lived, Hudson, he was he was a beautiful boy. But he was a 10-year survivor with mast cell. And he was also, Krista, one of the things that we could not find somebody to help put all the pieces together to understand sort of him holistically. He was also a lifetime, his allergies, he suffered from bad allergies his entire life. So it makes sense then that mast cell cancer was what he was afflicted with. But we're able to sort of get his allergies under control. But it just, for me, it brought together the notion that diet, nutrition, cancer, inflammatory immune responses, they're all interconnected. And while we're doing a great job, we still have so much to learn. So based on that, all of that, what is the inspiration of Wag Out Loud? What's your focus? What do you love to talk about? Just tell us about your podcast.
Well, thank you. Well, now I'm releasing 2 a month, and they're 30-minute episodes, really quick. I'm not a huge proponent of listening to tech while walking our dogs, because I think that's a great bonding time. But I'd say in a commute, or even if you have a Google device or an Alexa in your kitchen or somewhere else in your home, they're quick. And I like giving people just a taste of a certain topic and getting them intrigued and wanting to learn more and research on their own. we focus on canine health and wellness. And I like to come at it from a holistic or integrative approach. So that is our main focus.
Absolutely. One clarification just for everybody. I agree with you. Do not walk with your puppy dogs and be listening to anything. I only listen to my podcasts when we're tucked safely away in the tent at night. When I'm on the road, actually, I walk on highways, byways, country roads, farm roads. I'm not on mostly not on trail systems. I think on walk 3 out of the 300 miles, I might have 40 or 50 miles of trail system, maybe. But other than that, I'm walking, towards traffic. And so I've got to keep my senses, all my senses. But I also believe that pet parents should do the same, because walk time with your puppy dogs, you're able to listen to them. You're able to see if they're limping, if there's any lameness. It's just the time that you were able to interaction time, right? With your puppy dogs. So I'm a firm believer in as much interaction as you can, hands-on interaction as you can with your puppy dog, and also enrichment activities. So I'm a huge fan of that. So wellness, health, happiness is the theme of Wag Out Loud. That's a lot, but let's start with something I know that you're passionate about, as I am as well: diet, nutrition. What would you like to talk to our audience, which is as diverse as yours? What would you like to talk about? What are your areas of interest there?
And this is a 24-hour segment, correct? Just making sure I can fit it all in.
Can be, yeah.
Absolutely. We will certainly have you back on, so take as much time as you need. I'll just cut you off and we'll do part 2, part 3.
Well, I believe that nutrition is the foundation for us and our dogs for wellness. What if I were to eat Captain Crunch cereal for the rest of my life 3 times a day? Would that provide me the proper nutrition to thrive? No. And, everything I talk about with canine nutrition really can reflect on us as well, because Luke, you and I both know that the root of disease is inflammation. So what is causing that inflammation and eventually disease in our bodies? So food is fuel. We could talk forever just about, the 2 camps: are dogs carnivores or are dogs omnivores?
Well,
And
let's
that's
start there. I love that topic right there, because the one thing also you should know about me is, by virtue of not only backpacking cross country, but I've also traveled with the foundation. So I've tried to talk to as many personally, not just on the podcast, as many diet nutrition experts, veterinarians as I can. And I'm fascinated about a number of things. I'm fascinated that there still is a lot of disagreement on this. So let's start there. What do you think? Because some people think, it seems to me, that dogs are omnivorous secondary to their carnivorous diet, right? Their ancestral diet is that dogs got grains and veggies and everything else because they ate the rabbits, they ate everything else. And there are others who believe that no, dogs are omnivorous, that they survived on both the meat, the protein, and the wheat. So let's start there. What are your thoughts? What have you learned?
Well, we have to go back and look at the canine, which is a direct descendant from the gray wolf. Now, this is science. This is not me telling anybody anything different. So over 90% of the DNA that wolves have, dogs share that. So if we look at wolves or even wild dogs, they go after, their protein source is other animals, not plant-based. If there was a salad versus a rabbit, I think most wolves and dogs would go after the rabbit. So yes, they have evolved to be able to eat plant matter as well. And it's actually beneficial for them for so many reasons, the phytonutrients, the antioxidants. But if we were to look how the dog is built, that is showing an omnivore. So their teeth are made to rip flesh. It's the tearing of the meat. And they also have a shortened GI tract versus the omnivores and herbivores that have a much longer gastrointestinal tract.
Oh.
So amylase, that's what is in our saliva to start breaking down the plant-based cellulose material. And dogs don't have that in their saliva. They do have a little bit in their pancreas. So right there, that kind of tells you, yes, they are carnivorous. They have a hard time breaking down the sugars that are found in plant matter. So for these and so many other reasons, I totally agree with your first statement that they are carnivores, but they have an omnivore tendency, and they can have a little bit of carbohydrate. Now, if you look at dogs, and actually they've done studies on sled dogs, they do better during their races when they don't get carbohydrates. And a dog does not need carbohydrates in their diet. They don't need it. But if you were to look at a raw diet, let's say, there's two different types of raw diets. There's the prey model raw. So we're talking about ancestral diets. And God bless those people. That takes a lot of commitment. And that literally is feeding your dog prey. And whether that is, throw them a pheasant or a rabbit or what have you, they eat the fur, the eyes, the skin, everything. There's also a, what's it called? A I can't remember the name. Oh, I think it's Franken prey model, which is part of the prey model, where owners will buy the bits and pieces to make up the whole prey. So again, that's everything. That's fur, feathers, bones, the whole thing. A lot of people do the barf diet, and that's what I feed my dogs. So bones and raw food is the barf diet, and that is raw meat. So the muscle meat, the bones, and the organs, plus fruits, vegetables, dairy, and supplements. So that's the difference between the two types of raw diets that we're seeing today.
And the barf, to remind me correctly, is 100% raw. None of it's cooked at all.
No.
Okay.
So it's bones and raw food, and
Okay.
and you and I both know we never want to cook bones and give cooked bones to our dogs.
Sure. But I was curious about the vegetables, though. It really was my question.
Yeah.
So then it would be correct to say then, Krista, then that you're a proponent then of the barf diet. Is that what you feed Winston? Yeah.
Yep.
I knew it was Winston, but I had Higgins down as sort of the origin story to
Yes.
Wag Out Loud. So so you're a proponent of that. Yes, you feed Winston. Well, that in itself is a commitment, doing 100% raw. That's great. And that's something that I want to get to a little bit because I've always thought of it as a commitment, but something that you want to go through is you want to show us how that you can show pet parents how to cook the barf diet, I guess, on a budget, and then also do it probably where it's not just a logistical nightmare to some pet parents. And how can I do it and do it safely too? Because I will tell you though, if you are a proponent of the raw diet 100% for dogs, you are going to get kickback out there with some in the veterinary oncology community. Have you experienced that before?
Well, what I usually hear is, oh, what about the bacteria?
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, you prepare raw meat for yourself in the kitchen. How do you handle raw chicken? And it would be the same for any dog's food. And we have to remember, again, that the dog's GI tract is so short I mean, I don't know about your dog, but my dog eats poop and rocks and sticks and, anything that's on the ground. And they don't have issues. They have such a high level of acid in their stomachs as opposed to us. So it's very rare that your dog would not be able, and I'm not saying overnight that you're going from a cooked or dry processed diet immediately to raw. We know that that isn't safe for them, that you want to do it over a 7 to 10 day period and gradually introduce raw with their existing food. So it's usually with veterinarians, and you've heard it from the FDA, that there's a concern about bacteria.
Well,
And
I'm
I
not really
say,
concerned. I'm not so concerned with what the FDA has to say, because those guys have not always have motives that are upfront and completely transparent.
I agree.
I am concerned with veterinarians, especially veterinary oncologists, have to say. But you summed it up, and I think that you sized it up accurately. That it seems to be a preparation issue. That seems to be the concern, right? It's nothing about the raw diet itself. It's just the average
Correct.
pet parent may not prepare it correctly, and that's going to cause some sort of downstream issue with immunocompromised patients, dogs, which, as we know, cancer dogs, cancer companion animals are immunocompromised inherently in one way or the other, whether through medication, chemotherapeutic, or just the disease state itself. So that's it. I'm learning. I believe in a mix, and it's, for me, it's whatever. I've talked to so many pet parents, and I understand the science that's available, and I understand it's about almost every camp. And so I also understand the real pressures and the realities of certain pet parents. But one thing that I wanted to talk to you, but what fascinates me is the disparity or the lack of consistency within the veterinary community about diet nutrition. One of the things I found fascinating is that they have so little actual formal training and education. I think it's one class. I'm not sure, that may be old data, so I don't want to speak incorrectly. But that, I think, tremendously impacts sort of how pet parents see and understand diet, nutrition, and companion animals. One of the things I found most shocking, Krista, and within all of the veterinarians I talk, is that there's tremendous disagreement about whether dogs are right now from an evolutionary standpoint, right? There's some veterinarians that believe that dogs have not evolved. Their system has not evolved to the kibble diet, right? Because I think the kibble diet was introduced only some 70 years ago or something like that. So right. The little I know, well, I actually know a lot about science, but what I do understand about it is it probably takes a longer than 70 years for an organism to change fundamentally, right? All of their systems. So, but there are some people that believe differently and quite convincingly that dogs have evolved for the kibble diet, and the kibble diet should only be the future. So isn't that concerning or interesting that there's A, so little education formally, and B, so much disparity and beliefs within that community? Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. Kibble only was invented in the 50s. So before that, we had canned dog food, the kennel ration and the Alpo. And before that, dogs were eating fresh whole food. They were eating our food, table scraps. So in the 50s, and I hate calling kibble food. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. Going back to my analogy of eating Captain Crunch every day, that is what I think kibble, whether it's, found in your grocery store or the premium kibble, it's an extruded feed that is exposed to high heat. And to get those little nuggets, you can't have more than 20% protein in the manufacturing of that food. So it's a lower protein source. You know, if you talk about a fresh food or a raw diet, dogs are getting 70% or more protein in their diet, which is great. So you have this high starch diet in kibble, you know, to make it actually stick together to make these little kibbles. And again, dogs don't need carbohydrates, and these are so high in starch. And just like with us, if we're eating a high sugar diet, we have the glucose spikes, we have the diabetes, we have the inflammation, and that's exactly what's happening to our dogs. And it's so bad that they have to then put synthetic vitamins and minerals back in because everything has been exposed to this heat and there's nothing left. So you don't have a live food anymore. It's a dead food with no enzymes that the dog needs. And one more point on kibble, and I'll get off my soapbox. Most of the dogs on the kibble diet are in a constant state of dehydration because they're not getting enough moisture and water. So
I love you on your soapbox. You're a true believer, as am I. So then you're in the camp, which, as am I, that we have not gotten to the point where evolution has changed or the dog's GI system has changed for the kibble diet, that we still can make fundamental changes and we can get hopefully them back to the ancestral diet. One more thing I want to talk about in trends and bad science or bad science masked as ideology as it pertains to diet, nutrition, and dogs, something I'm really concerned about. And if you listen to this podcast long enough, I say it almost every episode. The thing I think about two things and two things alone: the future and dogs, and how those two things intersect. And you have people out there pushing the vegan diet on dogs. Don't need to name any names, but I had somebody on the podcast recently, and we didn't really delve down into it deeply because it wasn't really something we were focused on. What I was focused on is what their thinking is. They look at long-term models of resources, and what they're thinking is, well, we're just not going to have enough protein. We're not going to have enough chicken. We're not going to have enough beef in 50 years now to feed all the people plus all the animals. So we're just going to need to get people eating insects or the vegan diet, and then we'll convert them. There's some long-term downstream conversion to an insect diet. And
Right.
so
Gross.
that's fine if we need to have that discussion, right? Okay, because I'm a business guy. I understand. Well, sensible person understands resource allocation, right? If you're a family and you have human kids and animal kids, you understand you only have a limited income and that has to be allocated. Well, we have a planet that has a number of organisms in it that have to have sustenance, right? And so you have humans and you have companion animals and you have feed animals, right? And that constitutes most of the consumption of food in this world, right?
Mhm.
So if you believe that at some point in the future, based on models, that we might actually be in trouble, okay, then that's a discussion we need to have. We need to have that discussion, and I would challenge your models, right? What are the inputs, what's in the variables that you're looking at? But unfortunately, they don't want to have the discussion. But more importantly, they don't. It's not really science that they're looking at. They have an ideology that they're looking at, that they're pushing down. And what I have a problem with, Chris, is I have a problem with people making decisions on behalf of pet parents when their primary motive or interest isn't in pets or companion animals. So I think this vegan movement in dogs and companion animals is really concerning and disturbing. What do you think?
I totally agree. But I agree with these people that the factory farming model that we have now is broken. I mean, what we are doing to these poor feed animals during, I don't even want to call it a life, it's an existence before they are slaughtered. We have to change it. And going back to what I said before, it's our food industry as well as our dogs that is suffering. And what a lot of people don't realize, here in the United States, just the spraying of glyphosate, which is Roundup. The company is Monsanto that owns this awful toxic pesticide. And it's sprayed on our crops so much. And that's another thing. Kibble has glyphosate in it. And our dogs are exposed not only by eating it, but it's sprayed on our grass and in our parks. So they're walking on it, absorbing it through their feet. And they have, I think it's like a 7 times more percentage of glyphosate in their bodies, which is shown to be cancerous. And Europe doesn't use these toxic chemicals. So
you're exactly right. Is that food and food related issues, they transcend just our companion animals. They affect us as they are ours as well. I've been documenting my travels since my first walk back in 2008 when I left. And after that walk, one of my dogs was diagnosed with nasal cancer. His was nasal cancer. And after that, I did what I call a summer Murphy tour, where I traveled around the country and I talked to a number of veterinary oncologists, interviewed them as part of this documentary, this sort of ongoing documentary project that continues to go on and on. But one of the stops I made was in DC, and I talked to the Food and Water Advocacy Group, and I can't recall the specific name of the advocacy group, but they stemmed off of Ralph Nader's group some time ago, and they were looking in particular the problem of Chinese and food in human consumption. And what they realized in doing that, they realized, China's doing something really bad in food for our companion animals. And they realized what they figured out was that China, conditions are so deplorable in China for farming, for poultry farming and processing over in China, that they tried to get it exported over to the U.S. For human consumption via the USDA. Well, the USDA said, hell no, there's absolutely no way that's ever going to happen. So China was sitting on a huge inventory, and they said, well, we got to sell the chicken nonetheless. And they realized they could backdoor it through the FDA and get it into the pet industry. So all that crappy stuff that's not made for human consumption is being offloaded into the United States. And to the best of my knowledge, it's still going on. So that's horrendous, the practices that's going on and accepted.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. Nothing, and I mean nothing, in the pet industry is regulated. Food, treats, supplements, CBD, toys, nothing. So that's why I'm so loud about being an advocate for our dogs, that we have to make sure that we're giving them best we can. So I don't know if you guys heard, I posted it last week, that there is a bill, hopefully, to bring on a new arm of government, the Food Safety Administration, and take pet food out of being under the umbrella of the FDA, because they have not done anything to enhance the health of our animals. So I'm hoping that this could be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics any longer, but the problem is that you have so few inspectors out in the field of the FDA per number of, because the FDA covers not only, they cover cosmetics, drugs, they cover just a ton of things that's under their umbrella, whether the USDA is more focused and they have more inspectors per company, per whatever the metric is, whereas the FDA, they just don't have the people out in the field to be able to do all the inspections. So you're right, they totally backdoored into it. Well, we don't want to make this Wag Out Loud, a podcast, to wag depressingly, because this is a huge problem that spans human and animal. It's a share. It's like cancer. You know, most people, and this is something I'll sort of make a segue into this. It's like what Ginger and I found out with the Puppy Up Foundation is that so many people think in terms of human cancer and canine cancer. It's like, guys, no, it's one cancer, right? because dogs are getting the same things that we're getting. They get brain cancer, bone cancer, lymphoma, melanoma, everything that we get, plus a few more they're getting. And so there's only one conclusion. I'm not the scientist, but I know I can draw one simple conclusion from that. Well, we're all sharing something, right? We share an ecosystem, getting the same cancer. Why the hell are we studying them as though they're two separate problems? It's unbelievable. And this is still going on. I cannot convince the media to save my life. Ginger can't, whenever we do a press release, to stop using canine cancer, use one cancer or something like that. As a writer, I get it. I understand. Know your audience, but it's a real big problem. And so when I thought we'd be so further along, Krista, and education and awareness and the one cancer model, but it's a daily uphill battle that we have to wage. The media and in the trenches at the most fundamental level, which is the pet parent, right? Just trying to get the message out to them. So it's a lot of work. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I still talk to people who say dogs get cancer.
Yep, me too.
So it's just amazing to me that somebody wouldn't know. And then I'm thinking, well, aren't they lucky because they don't know? Or then I really start thinking about it, or did their dog get sick and they never took their dog to the vet?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's another one. I remember we did an event and we were talking to this gentleman and he was talking about his golden retriever. And he said, well, I'm pretty sure she had cancer when she died, but I never took her to the vet. And I'm thinking, do you know who you're talking to? I mean, it was just like,
that's responsible.
I know. I'm like, I was just thinking to myself, I think I would have just I would have had that story, left it untold for telling it to me and Luke. It was ridiculous. But anyway, I was like, okay, so do they not know, or they just didn't know that their dog had cancer and the dog died?
Well, unfortunately, I think this all boils down to big pharma and big food companies. And that is it. It's the almighty dollar, unfortunately, that the research and studies are funded by these large companies, and the outcome, has to be in their favor. And, these fresh food, commercial pet food companies, they don't have the money that these big companies do. And the reason I'm saying big pharma is because another cause of cancer, and it's proven, is over vaccinating our dogs.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother Oprah.
Well, it's fine because, again, one of the questions I always pose to the stakeholders, the thinkers, the scientific people, is what are the top risk factors of cancer in our companion animals, and multiple vaccinations are up there. But you're right, that is a badger's nest of a different sort. But before we jump on to a more light and enjoyable, and I think more manageable topic than the evils of corporate America, because you're absolutely correct in that it's not just that they're all ill or evil intended. They just have the power base. They have the balance of power in their favor, and they make decisions. And sometimes those decisions are bad, and they make those decisions that affect their own behalf of pet parents. And that's a disempowerment that I find unacceptable, because it ends up causing cancer, which is my problem. And so, so one of the things that the Puppy Up Foundation, we try to accomplish, one of the pillars of our mission, we've got several: education, awareness, investment in cancer research, now canine cancer treatment, but also pet parent empowerment. And we do that through our Puppy Up walks, and that's alliterative for a reason, but it's important, because the only way that we can shift that balance of power is through pet parent empowerment. And they're hard. It's just a job. That's a huge job to try to get. It's like herding cats, except they're dog parents. They're not cat parents. It's just hard because, but the reason why is because well, pet parents is everybody, right? There's 70 million, 80 million dogs households in this country. The pet lovers, pet parents span every socioeconomic status, every ethnicity, every culture, everything. You find them in everything, every nook and cranny. So it's hard to put them together on a very large scale and get the data and the information to them. So that's something that you and I are very passionate about. Love to talk to you more about that offline or continue discussions here on Fuzzy Butts and Friends, because we do have the puppy up walks. Unfortunately, the pandemic has really affected that the last couple of years, but we're starting to ramp up again. And having someone as passionate about health, diet, nutrition, and wellness, we need more people like you and me and other people working together, because it's going to take, it's bigger than the Puppy Up Foundation, it always has been. But again, getting other organizations to work together is also a Herculean task. So without trying to go down any further in that badge's nest, let's have some fun, Krista, and let's talk about, so we know that we want to get pet parents on the barf or the raw, or maybe more of a transitory, some a little bit cooked, some a little bit kibble, but some a little of that. So one of the things that you expressed to Ginger that you wanted to talk about here on Fuzzy Butts and Friends is two things: home cooking for your companion and feeding them on a budget. So take it away. Let's talk about that. I'm excited.
Okay. Well, I don't want to freak anybody out. You know, when I talked about that, I feed Winston the barf, the raw diet, bones and raw food, I feed him mostly commercial raw. So don't think that, oh my gosh, I have to put all the pieces together. Do I have the right percentage of bone and fat and protein and organ meat? No, there are some great companies out there that are doing it already. And you can either buy it frozen. They have nuggets, they have patties, or you can get a dehydrated raw, which keeps all of the essential nutrients in it. It's just devoid of moisture. So you would just add the moisture back into that dehydrated raw. And of course, look for a complete and balanced meal, a diet. Speaking of that, when we talk about homemade, and I just love the passion of dog owners where they say, I cook for my dog. And the first thing I think of is, that's great. Well, what do you give them? And they'll say, oh, I make, chicken and rice. And that's it. And that, unfortunately, I've learned recently, is not enough. So I love people that cook for their dogs, but a lot of times they're not getting all the nutrients they need. So we're actually doing them a disservice. Most of the recipes online, unless they're formulated by a veterinary nutritionist or a certified nutritionist, are not going to be complete and balanced. So we really have to do our homework and get recipes that have everything in the right ratios. So if you do want to home cook for your dog, and I get it, why you'd want to, there are two great websites that will help you make sure that they are getting everything they need. One of it is petdiets.com, super easy. And the other one is secure.balanceit.com. So they're super easy to use. I would definitely look at those if you prefer to do a home cooked diet. Or, reach out to me. I've got some people in the industry doing great things that already have recipes that are awesome. And no matter what you're feeding, I really encourage everybody to rotate your proteins.
You're more than welcome. I'm sorry, go ahead. Please talk about that. That's interesting. I like that. Rotate your proteins. I like how you said that.
Yeah. There are 22 amino acids that dogs need, and 10 of them their body can't make. So they're essential amino acids that they need to get from the food they eat. And I like to rotate my proteins to make sure that they're getting nutritionally balanced meals all the time. You want to mix it up. You don't want the same thing every day. You can even vary the brand of food as well. And I'm not saying every single day you have, today has to be chicken, tomorrow has to be beef. It's over time. So, I feed Winston, I prepare his meals like 8 days in advance and his Tupperware, and I put all his stuff together. So, this week is beef. Next week it'll be bison. Then we go to chicken. And in a perfect world, again, if we have unlimited funds, and I know most of us don't, and that's going to segue into the budget deal. But pasture raised, pasture finished meat, the protein source. So it's not the factory farmed animal that had an awful life, that was fed. If you guys even knew what our cattle is being fed.
Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me.
for our consumption as well as our dogs, it's really scary. So that's what I have to say on home cooking.
Sure.
Do it if you can commit to doing it correctly.
Okay.
And you guys, there's so many companies popping up that deliver right to your door.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to stop there and ask you, is that don't hold back on recommending brands that because you mentioned a second ago dehydrated, because on my first walk we had Honest Kitchen, they had dehydrated, and I thought the world of them.
Yes.
Lucy Poston's. We've since heard they've sold to a private equity company. The quality control has gone down a little bit from the CEO of Hollywood Feed we had on recently. But anyway, so if you can recommend any specific brands,
Sure.
Yeah, love that too.
Yeah. Well, there's some on my website.
Okay.
I'm an affiliate with companies that I have tried their products with Winston, and I've researched, where do you source your ingredients? Do you have patents? Do you have studies? Blah, blah, blah. So I've done the homework, and, great dehydrated foods you'll find on my website with a discount, Dr. Harvey's. So they make it completely easy. They have a base of a fruit and veggie for raw vibrance is the name. You just add water, whatever meat you want to, whether it's cooked or raw, and an oil. And that is a complete and balanced meal. They also have dehydrated food, everything's in there, the protein included, that you just add water and you're good to go.
So Winston is your taste tester then? Has he become an influencer then?
Well, he's in my videos. I do videos on the products that I know, like, and trust. And we've tried things that were not Winston approved or mom approved. So but it's just so fun watching these amazing companies with heart coming into the market and just producing amazing products and services that people can check out. So I have my favorite trusted brands on my Wag Out Loud website. But I did want to get to the budget, because that is one of my biggest questions. Okay, Krista, well, I don't have unlimited funds, and I have 5 big dogs in my house. I can't afford raw. I cannot afford a fresh diet. So what can I do? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. If you are interested in feeding raw, I would look to see if you have a raw dog food co-op in your area. That brings down the price immensely. So these co-ops work with local butchers, processors, farmers to get you reduced rates, because they have this bulk raw food. You can also, I mentioned the dehydrated, they have toppers now that you can just add. So if you're on an extreme budget, try to get the best kibble that you can, because at least you have that base and it's complete and balanced. It has all the nutrients. But I would just feed that as a base, and you can always add fresh food to that. And your dog is going to start salivating when I tell you scrambled eggs. Eggs are the world's perfect protein. So dogs love eggs. Just put some eggs on top. Canned sardines in
Wait, so
water.
do you scramble your eggs? Because that's not raw. Or do you crack them raw in their kibble?
Well, most people would think a raw egg, ew.
Mhm.
Yes, I feed raw.
Okay.
But if you want to lightly cook or
Right,
scramble or
right.
hard boil, go for it. Your
I'm
dog's
I'm
gonna.
with you. Eggs are great. My kids love eggs, and I just don't give it to them often enough. But they're a perfect source of protein. They're a great source, and they're reasonably priced. I too am a fan of going to butcheries. Butcheries are a great source. I'm not sure are you in Colorado?
I am.
Yes, yes. I'm quite certain you have dog meat co-ops in Colorado, but you won't find them here in Memphis, and you probably won't find them in the flyover states. So in lieu of doing that, pet parents, you can go to your local butchery, because they don't they can tell you exactly, well, they do the processing of whatever the meat you can get. Pardon me, you can get deer meat as well if that's cheaper.
Yes.
You have other alternatives, and they also will have other forms of protein as well. So it's just a great source of, even if you don't want to give like some of the sweet meats, or some of the things that you just don't want to give your dogs or your pets or whatever, you can certainly put them into water and use that as a beautiful broth. And put the broth on anything else. So I'm a huge advocate. I know, Krista, you and I could talk a lot about just cooking and just wonderful ideas, but I'm an advocate of getting everything from what nature gives you. So if nature gives you a beautiful deer carcass, or it gives you a cow carcass or whatever, use every part in every way that you can for your dog, because it all contains the goodness. It's nature, right? Nature recycles, and that's the way this whole darn thing works.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So is that so that's great. Just really good solid tips on how to keep in the budget tight, because we live in a punishingly hyperinflationary times, unfortunately, that hopefully it'll normalize at some point. And that's where, unfortunately, people tend to make sacrifices. They tend to make it the food. It seems
Sure.
to human food, right? Okay, I can't afford the really good proteins anymore, so I'm just going to go with the processed crap. And so if they do that for themselves, they make those decisions for themselves. They certainly would make it for their kids, or some don't. Some don't. I think my kids sometimes eat better than I do.
Oh, absolutely. I can say that about mine.
I bet they do. All right.
Yeah.
So what's
So another thing
please go
is
ahead.
canned sardines in water, very inexpensive. I think they're like $1 or less each. Oh my gosh, great source of omega fatty acids, great for their coat. And I can't speak highly enough. I mean, show me a dog that won't eat sardines in their food. Oh my gosh, your dog.
You don't do it in oil though, just the water.
No, because not all oils are created equal.
Okay.
Most, like vegetable oil is what most sardines are packed in, and
Yeah.
that is not a good essential oil for your dog. Blueberries are excellent antioxidants. And then put some greens. 10% of your dog's diet should be fruits, veggies, and maybe a little bit of dairy, whether that's kefir or yogurt. Goat's milk is my go-to. And there was even a study of dogs, I believe it was on Scotties, that 3 times a week they were given greens on top of their kibble. And that lessened their chance of certain cancers by over 95%. Just doing that.
Are those cruciferous greens that you're talking about typically? Like the broccoli?
Well, you could. It was the leafy greens that they did the study on.
Okay.
So I'd say spinach or kale.
I think those are all cruciferous. I think that's the part of the leafy greens. I can't recall. It's been a long time, but they have shown to have anti-cancerous properties for sure.
Yes.
Great.
And you're the perfect person, Luke, to talk about, carbohydrates, especially with a dog that has cancer. I've had the gentleman that's the head of the keto sanctuary, that they're doing amazing research on dogs with cancer and getting great results with a very low carb diet, which would be diets like we're talking about, not the high processed, high carb, high starch, but whole food with a very small amount of veggies and fruit for the antioxidant and phytonutrients.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's so important because the cancer diet is so critical, because cancer has evolved. We know dogs' nature evolves. Cancer too has evolved, and it's almost where it's self-sustainable, right? It has its through angiogenesis, it creates its own network of blood vessels, so it can feed itself essentially through the blood vessels. But it also is able to provide its own energy, right? It has its own power pack, and the way that it fuels its power pack, so that's how it grows, right? Cancer grows, everything uses fuel to grow. Well, how it fuels that the energy for that fuel pack is carbs, right? So if you give carbohydrates to a cancer patient, you're basically are giving fuel to the cancer cells. So there shouldn't really be any cancer diet at all that has, you have to have a reasonable amount of carbs. I think they're complex ones. I'm not that very well versed on specifically what types are the good carbs versus the bad carbs. I just know where to go to find out that information. But that's critical. That's a really big piece of information with the cancer diet. But
Absolutely.
cancer diet is also important, and I want to find out how much you know about it for a number of reasons. So let's talk about that, because we know a couple of things, Krista. We know that that by the time a dog is diagnosed with cancer, it's already fairly well advanced, because dogs don't show pain like humans do. So when a dog has bone cancer, typically the bone has spongified or fractured, and it's typically already spread. So time is of the essence. So one of the things that cancer dogs suffer most from is cachexia. Cachexia is the wasting of the natural normal cells because of a lack of nutrients, because the cancer just sucks the nutrients from the body. So cancer diet is so important. So how much do you know about that? Do you consult with and work with pet parents whose companion animals have cancer?
You know, I've had so many amazing guests on the show, and the bone cancer, the osteosarcoma that you're talking about. I've had Angela Ardolino on. She has a Doberman Pinscher that, to my knowledge, is still alive. She kept her holistically able to keep her limb for quite a long time through diet, through CBD, through THC. So she shared her protocol on the show. And then you and I both know Jim and Renee from Tripods. They were on the show as well. So it's just, again, it's educating people and bringing awareness. And when people learn something about dog health, a lot of times they don't even know that it pertains to them as well. So diet, it just makes sense. You know, when you see the diseases that we have, not only cancer, but obesity and diabetes, our dogs have the same exact rates. And you have to look at, what are we eating? What are we exposed to environmentally? And unfortunately, that is giving us these awful statistics of over 50% of our dogs are dying from cancer, especially over the age of 10. And we have to do something. It's not working.
It is not working at all, and I'm not 100% convinced that the institutions that control diet, nutrition in humans and our canine counterparts are redeemable, or I don't think that I think there's always going to be an inherent conflict of interest between companies, for-profit companies that provide diet, nutrition. I may be wrong, and that's why it's incumbent upon pet parents to educate themselves to such a great extent. But cachexia is really, really bad, because once you get behind and the dog starts losing weight so fast, it becomes, well, it's just out of control. You can't get ahead. And one of our early guests on Fuzzybutts and Friends, Krista, so a wonderful person, his name is Jeff Sutherland. He's the CEO of Canine Biologics. Are you familiar with that company?
I am not.
Well, I have lost 3 dogs to cancer, one of which, my most recent, was so fast, diet nutrition was never really an issue. But the other 2, Malcolm or Murphy was the one where inappetence was a big problem. Cachexia became a problem. And so we were always looking at it away. And I was kind of in the background coming up with an idea to have sort of a kit type of solution that once your dog is diagnosed with cancer, is you have something, a kit that has basically all the nutritional and dietary components that your dog is going to need. And that's what Canine Biologics has done. They've created a kit. It's great. It's exciting. And they're also, that's phase 1. Phase 2 is they're also developing like cancer specific, diet and nutrition kits, because there are some types of cancer that have different nutritional requirements, I'm sure, as you know. So we would love it'd be great for you to have them on your show, Ginger.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it
I will
out.
connect the 2 of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ginger.
Yeah, I'm trying. We have Hudson's Hope Fund, and we're going to have like cancer kits going home, and I certainly hope that we can have one of their sample nutritional kits. But it's just an example of there are people out there that are thinking about solutions to these problems. So I'm very hopeful. I'm not, and I think that's where it's going to come from. I think it's going to come from not looking at the governing bodies that set the regulatory practices, because they're always going to represent the big corporate interests. I think it's the innovators in the marketplace that are going to drive the change. I believe that anyway. So it's a great company for you to think about. All right, so we've really covered so many critical, important topics. It's exciting. What other, Krista, what other issues involving animal health and wellness that you would like to talk about here on Fuzzybutts and Friends?
Oh, I just don't think we have time, Luke. We could go into
We're about at the hour mark, so it's a loaded question. I'm sorry I dumped that on you. I really was hoping she was like, please don't say, well, now that you asked let's talk about this. But really, if there's some really good things, some bullet points on that pet parents should have on their radar. You said diabetes. Let's just kind of check those off the list, and we'll have you back on the show.
Well, there's diabetes, there's dental care, which is huge. The over-vaccination is huge. Exposure to EMF, electromagnetic frequencies.
Wow.
These are all showing to be cancer causing. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help detoxify our dogs and our environment, for sure.
Our environment, absolutely, for all of us, for all of us as a shared species, or as a joint species in a shared ecosystem. Well, it sounds like that we have enough to talk about in part 2 of this episode, because all of those equally are large topics. But diabetes, it to me fascinates me, because there is a direct correlation in the obesity in American people and the obesity of our companion animals and diabetes. So is there anything that you want to just touch on that? Because I see that as being like next to cancer, like the probably biggest health crisis in our pets. Your thoughts?
Well, again, it comes down to, what are we feeding our dogs? Is it species appropriate? And most likely it is not. So they're getting too many carbs, therefore too much sugar,
right,
and not enough fiber. And that sugar turns to glucose, it spikes their insulin, and you just have this vicious cycle of too much insulin, not enough insulin, that the dog's body cannot acclimate.
Well, let's make this actionable for pet parents, because I try to do that. Sometimes I forget, but it's like me, because I think about so many things involving my kids, my dogs, and I screw up a lot, and I forget things, and I don't give them a proper diet. So let's make this actionable. What percentage of carbohydrates are the things that contributed to the majority of or a lot of the health problems? What percentage is a target like just don't exceed this in most cases of dogs. I know dogs aren't everything one fits all. I know that's not true. That's true. And there are different developmental phases, but on average, what is an excessive amount of carbohydrates, the one that causes the most amount of problems as a percentage of their total diet? What do you think?
What you see in most kibbles is a minimum of 40%
Good
carbohydrate.
God, that sounds high.
It
Wow,
is
is
high.
that right? Wow, that's at 40%. Wait, looking at myself in the mirror, that may be 40%, maybe right. What's that like? I don't great. I'm not always great with myself. My kids are good, but not me. But that's crazy.
It's
That's
too
that
much.
high.
It's too high. Like in a fresh or raw diet, 10% of their entire diet should be fruits, vegetables, or dairy. And that, Luke, that's
Yeah.
a whole nother discussion is,
Right.
well, what about DCM and what about grains? And I shouldn't be feeding grains, right? But those foods that are grain free are substituting with high starch vegetables. It's the legumes, it's the sweet potatoes. And I mean, check out the carbohydrate content. It's right there. It's no
Right.
better.
Well, certainly. So to make it actionable, because I know it does get really it gets hard for some pet parents, is just look at the carb content, the percentage as a total diet, and try to find kibble if that's what you're doing right now. I'm not advocating that. Try to find because to me it's to do the least amount of damage with what you have for now, then learn what you need to learn to make improvements going forward. So try to get the lowest percentage, and then let's get them to your website. Krista, give us all your information, give us all your contact information. Where can they find out more?
Thank you, Luke. And thank you, Ginger.
Oh, you're welcome. I've
this is
enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, it's just simply wagoutloud.com. And you can actually download all of the podcast episodes there, as well as on your favorite podcast player. We have resources, we have a community, I put on events. So please just check it out. And, the trusted brands that I mentioned to you are products and services that I know, like, and trust that you might want to help your dog to thrive with. So, yep.
Well, you're a wealth of knowledge. You are, Krista. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm pretty knowledgeable myself. I try not to. I pretend like I'm not, but I have learned a few things, and so I can say you're legit, and you know what you're talking about as it pertains to cancer diets, and that's my sphere of concern, because there are some people out there that say some things that just aren't correct. So I like what you have to say. I love the passion, and I love the fact that we just got to get loud. So, Ginger, are you ready to get loud? Start yelling. Ginger, you look like
I'm always ready to yell.
Oh, you look like
Woohoo!
all right, Ginger. Is there anything that I left out? Did I screw anything up this time?
Nope, not that I can think of.
Okay, I think you say that every time, just for whatever reason.
All right. Question, Luke.
Yes,
what shoes do you wear on your walks? Because they must be the best walking shoes ever.
Vasque again, Vasque. Some people pronounce it Vasque, some Vasque, VASQUE. My first walk, I tried several, and that one, it's the best, absolutely best. And I just got some donated from a local company, Outdoor Inc. Shout out to them. Thank you very much. They're the mid ankle light. I can't remember the specific. I got pictures and all the information on my website, but they're absolutely amazing. I love my hiking boots.
Right.
Yeah. Well, are you a hiker? Do you hike?
I like to hike and I camp. So yes, I'm always all about, and we travel in Europe, and I need waterproof and, all that.
So you're hardcore. So we can talk about what I call epic walking with your companions. Do you walk? I'm sure do you walk with Winston, or?
You're way ahead of me.
Okay. All right.
Hundreds of miles. No.
You can always join him on walk 3.
Well,
true. What is your route, by the way, on the next one?
The route it's along the Hudson River, because I lost Hudson to cancer, and so he was named after the Hudson River. So we start at its origin up in the Henderson Lake, up in the Adirondacks, and we'll snake along the Hudson River through the valley, Hudson Valley, all the way down to New York City, where it ends.
Nice.
300 miles with my three-legged Pyrenees, Grayson. And so, yes, we have so much more to talk about. Every time I'm like, okay, we gotta wrap things up. There's something else for us to talk about. So we will totally have you back on our podcast, Krista. It's been a tremendous amount of pleasure for us. But before we go, we'd like to wrap up the show with the Puppy Up Foundation and their cancer tip of the week. Ginger, do you have something for us this week?
I do have something, but as some of our podcasts we do, a lot of times we talk about a lot of things that have to do with dogs and cancer and what not to do. So cut out the carbs, that's one. But one of the things I wanted to mention was labored breathing. If your dog seems to be having an issue with breathing, you need to take them to the vet, because it could be a whole host of different types of cancers. It could be nothing. They could have just gotten hot outside and just panting. But if it continues, you need to take them to the vet. It could lead to so many other things that could be wrong with them than just a little breathing issue.
That's very, very true. As I've had one with congestive heart failure, so for many reasons, labor breathing is a big sign of concern. All right, Ginger, thank you for the Puppy Up Foundation Cancer Tip of the Week.
You're welcome.
All right, Krista, any last minute words to the pet parents out there in our audience before we go?
I just encourage everybody to be the best advocate for your dog's health and wellness that you can.
Perfect. On that note, thank you everybody for listening in this week. Puppy Up. Talk soon.